Hi, I took this video while I was designing a puzzle to add to my Dungeons & Dragons game, in which I am running the official 5th edition module Out of the Abyss. Like most DMs, I am adding a lot of my own content to the module, and in my case, a lot of that is puzzles. I try to write about one puzzle per dungeon or location, and in this video, I'm making a puzzle for a dungeon called The Lost Tomb. This video contains major spoilers for this dungeon in particular. If you just want the puzzle, if you're running this module and you want to use it or whatever, you do not need to watch this video. There's a link to a document in the video description. Everything you need to run the puzzle is there. Only watch this video if you want to see the behind-the-scenes process of creating it. Okay, let's go. Alright, let's start by looking at the Lost Tomb dungeon. I think there's a lot of benefit to having like a puzzle that you can just drop in anywhere, but the way I'm approaching this and the way I approach most of the puzzles for this campaign is building a puzzle specifically for a location. So this dungeon is very small. It's a 5-room dungeon. The first room, there is a diorama, but other than that, there's just a staircase going down. It goes down 100 feet to Area 2 here. Area 2 is a shrine, and there's a door that leads to Area 3 here. In Area 3, there are 4 sarcophagi that are the final resting places of the servants of Bryces of Khaem, and each of them is turned into a specter that attacks you. Then down here in Area 4, there is the false tomb, where you think at first that the sorceress Bryces of Khaem is entombed, but it turns out to be empty. One of these sarcophagi in Area 3 rolls aside, and underneath that there is an entrance to the true tomb. This is where Bryces of Khaem is actually entombed. Bryces of Khaem has become a wraith who attacks you, and there is a great treasure there. Alright, so that's the general gist of this dungeon. Let's go over some specific things I just wrote down for brainstorming. Focus on Fargus. Okay, so most of the quests in this module are not focused around one particular character, but this is an exception. The Lost Tomb is the main quest of one of the characters, Fargus Rumblefoot. Fargus Rumblefoot is one of the player characters. It was originally an NPC, but one of the players is controlling it now. Fargus is a halfling treasure hunter, and finding the Lost Tomb is the whole reason he came to the Underdark. This is sort of like his ultimate quest, so I want to make sure that that player especially can be engaged in this dungeon. So he's not big on combat, but he's got a lot of handy skills. He's very good with potions. He's high intelligence, high charisma. Also carries a stone speaker crystal. This is a magic item that lets you cast Speak with Animals, Speak with Plants, or Speak with Dead once per day. So I think Speak with Dead is probably going to be the most salient here. The corpse must still have a mouth and can't be undead. I don't think you can use this on any of the specters or the wraith in this dungeon. But if you can use it, you can ask the corpse up to 5 questions. So that definitely seems potentially useful. At the same time, when I'm a player, I'm this way, and my players, I think most players, often forget about abilities they don't use very often, so I want to make sure that even if you don't remember to cast Speak with Dead, that you can still solve this, so probably just use it for hints. Tie up Fargus's partner plotline. So Fargus's backstory is that he found a clue to where the Lost Tomb is located. He and his partner came into the Underdark, and when he revealed to his partner the location, his partner betrayed him, pushed him in some spider webs, and took off for the Lost Tomb himself. So obviously I want to tie up that plot line to find out the fate of Fargus's partner. So one thing that springs immediately to mind is possibly you get here and you find the corpse of Fargus's former partner who died on a trap or something, and then you can use the stone speaker crystal to get some answers from his corpse. So I think that'll be pretty easy to work in no matter what the puzzle is like. Okay, obvious places, Area 1 and Area 3. So just looking at this, there's 2 obvious places, I think, just from the layout of this that seem like obvious places for puzzles. One is when you first come in, you could easily put a door here to get out of Area 1. You need to solve a puzzle. There's this stone diorama, so that could definitely be a clue. This could be a complete puzzle. The other thing is Area 3, finding the entrance to the true tomb underneath one of these sarcophagi. The sarcophagus will only move aside once you solve the puzzle. Either of those would be good. You could definitely also have one in Area 4 with the trap. Maybe you get trapped in the room until you solve the puzzle. May break things up better if it's not the first thing, though. Yeah, so the thing immediately before this, finding the Lost Tomb, exactly where it is on the overworld map, is itself a puzzle. That was not in the module. I made it. So the party's going to have solved the puzzle just before they get here. So I think that probably my preferred place would be Area 3, because that way it's not just 2 puzzles back to back. Other interesting things in the dungeon, some of the minor details. Doors pivot. So there's only a few doors in here, but they are huge. They're 10 feet wide stone, and in order to open them, you push them and they turn 90 degrees on a pivot around their central axis, like a bookcase to a hidden area or something. So this door could rotate 90 degrees and then be like horizontal across here. And it requires a strength check to move, to open or close. The same with these two doors here, connecting to area 4. Yeah, so I thought that was interesting. You can like block off different directions if you move the door 90 degrees. Calendar stone. It said there was a calendar stone at the first landing in area 1. Yeah, this right here. But there's nothing else said about it at all. So I could definitely use something there. That could be a hint maybe. 100-foot staircase, so the staircase goes down 100 feet. I think that's just to make it hard to run away from the monsters because they can go through walls. We could put some puzzle aspect in there. Sarcophagus on rollers. Yes, so the way this hidden entrance works is that this sarcophagus moves 5 feet to the left, and that you see a hole underneath it. Canopic jars with desiccated organs. So in area 4 here, this shelf contains canopic jars containing the organs that formerly belonged to the servants in area 3. Cursed trap. Yeah, so the way this one works is when you open the false tomb's lid, you have to make a saving throw or else you receive a curse for 24 hours. Dawnbringer's psychic please. Okay, yeah, so the main treasure of this dungeon is a sentient magic weapon called Dawnbringer in area 5 here in the True Tomb. And throughout the dungeon, you hear it. You hear this like feminine voice in your head saying, please come, help save me. And that's Dawnbringer communicating with you. And I think the idea is that you're going to assume that this voice you're hearing is the voice of the sorceress of Bryces of Khaem. So the twist is when you get to the bottom and you see that she's actually become a wraith who's going to kill you, and the voice belongs to something else. Invisible chest, yeah. So the chest containing the sword, I think it says it's in here, but it's invisible. But yeah, if the puzzle happens before this point, probably won't use that too much. Maybe Dawnbringer can give you some psychic hints or something, but I think we've got a lot to work with here. One thing that I'm interested in, but I don't think I want to use it here, is combat puzzles. That's like where you have to solve the puzzle during combat. So you're like fighting monsters, and on your turn you can flip a switch or something. In my experience, that's really hard to balance right, especially if the players don't know exactly how the puzzle works when combat starts. Investigating and trying to figure things out is so costly because you're like foregoing an attack. I'm sure that there's a way to handle that well, but the last couple times I've tried it didn't work out super well, so I think I'm going to have this puzzle just be outside combat. I think it would make the most sense. You come in area 2, you find the trap in area 4, you fight the monsters in area 3, and then you get some clue that there's a puzzle here. If that's going to be the case, then we could have the puzzle all be here in area 3. Each of the tombs could have a switch on it. You have to hit the right switches or something like that, and when you hit them all right, then the sarcophagus moves aside. But I feel like area 2 and area 4 could also come into play pretty easily. What if these canopic jars that contain the organs of the people in area 3, if you had to like match them up somehow, and you need to have a player in area 4 and a player in area 3 to like coordinate back and forth, and maybe these doors keep closing on you, or maybe certain things you do will close the doors, which makes it so you can't communicate with each other. I feel like there's a lot of possibilities there. And there could definitely be like hints on the wall here in area 2, so maybe somebody needs to be reading that at the same time. Yeah, there's not much else given about area 2. So there's a shrine here, shreds of dusty tapestries scattered on the floor. This might be a good place to have the corpse of Fargus's partner. So Fargus can be like talking to him in here. Well, somebody's in area 3, somebody's in area 4, and he's like communicating between them. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think there's a lot to go on here, so let me do some more brainstorming and I'll be back. Okay, it's a little later now. I have thought some more about this, and I definitely still like the main idea that I sort of started with earlier. So these 4 tombs in here, you have to, in area 3, you're going to have to move them somehow, and the way to control it will be using the canopic jars here in area 4. So you have to have at least one player in each place. So I think I'd like to have it where the player in area 4 who's controlling it can't see exactly what's going on, so the player in area 3 has to communicate it to them somehow. So I'll have to figure out some way to like make one room visible to a player but not the other. Yeah, I thought about you having to move things in and out of the rooms using these doors. I don't think that's going to be necessary. You may have to close this door at some point, like if you need to have 2 of the tombs slide into this entryway for a short period of time. You have to have the door closed, because if it's open, then it will stick out and you'll be only able to fit 1 tomb in there. But I'm not really sure that's going to be necessary either. So yeah, I think they'll just be able to leave the doors open and just talk back and forth. So how do you want to move these tombs? So I was thinking that maybe each one of them could have like a quarter of a symbol on it, and you have to put them together so that they're next to each other and the symbols line up. Classic sliding block puzzle. Yeah, I'm still trying to think about how I want the jar controls to operate. I'm thinking like there's a shelf with 4 niches, and there's 4 jars in them, and each jar corresponds to one of the tombs, and each niche corresponds to one of the 4 cardinal directions, north, south, east, or west. And it only activates when you put like all 4 jars in, so you have to choose which jar goes in which niche, and then all 4 of the tombs will move at the same time, like 1 square, north, south, east, or west, depending on which jar is in which niche. And I've got some ideas for like different ways you can hint for this, like there could be symbols on the tomb that match the symbols on the jars is an obvious thing, but I think I'll be able to come up with that pretty easily once I know exactly how the puzzle works. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is try to decide what is the necessary final arrangement of the tombs and how you control it using the jars. And I'll fill in hints and things like that once I have that down. Okay, I think this is working out pretty well. So the idea here is I've labeled each of these tombs, and they can each slide in each of 4 directions. And I have this block in the center that is, they can't go over that. They can only go around it. And you have to line them up. I have here on the right the solution state. So if you get each of these tombs in these positions, then that's the solution of the puzzle. And I just picked these positions sort of at random, but I'm going to try to figure out if there's a better way to move these. So I think it doesn't matter if the final state is like this, where each of the tombs is above and below it, or if they're like in the corners like they start, or they could all be down by 1 here. The final state involves 2 tombs there and 2 tombs there. That's not bad, it just means you have to like crawl over the tombs in order to get to the center. And I think the center is where like the floor will open up and you can drop down to the real tomb. Yeah, I don't think it matters that much, because once you get them into the right corners, then you can just shift them up and down pretty easily, I think, for the mechanics I have in mind. But the ordering, I think there might be a different ordering that's more challenging to reach. So this room is really kind of nice how this worked out. This room is basically the exact right size for this puzzle, because with this block in the middle, they all have to stay in this sequence going around A, B, D, C. You can move them around, so like A's in the lower right, but then that tells you exactly where B, C, and D are going to be. The only way to get to a state like on the right, where they're not in that sequence, is to use the entry doorway. So you have to have something come down, and then slide into the doorway. And then this one can slide past it. And this one slides back out and then down, and now you've swapped A and C. So that's not good enough to get you this solution either. But if A was here, then C would be here, then D and B. Okay, so if you swap B and D, then you can get to this configuration on the right without using the doorway anymore. So it does require 1 swap. That's not bad, but I think there's a way that you can make it so that it requires more than 1 swap. Let's see, so if you fix A in position here, then there are 6 other possible ways to arrange the other 3 tombs. So this one requires 0 swaps, that's what you start with. If you swap C and D, that's 1 swap. If you swap B and D, that's 1 swap. If you move C up here, so like D is here and B is here, then that's swapping A and C. Basically, I just said move C past A. And then if you swap A and B, you'll get another one. So that's 5. I think that if you swap B and C, There's no way to get to this state from the starting state without using at least 2 swaps. So maybe I'll go with that and rearrange it somehow. Alright, so if we move everything clockwise 1, it means C and D wind up on the bottom and A and B wind up on the top, which is kind of cool. So yeah, there's a few different ways. So you could get to here by swapping A and B and C and D, or by swapping C and D and C and B and then rotating. But in any case, it's going to involve 2 swaps involving at least 3 tunes. So I think that this is a pretty good final state. And this is kind of nice symmetry. Although, I think if you started like this, it would be a little obvious that you need to swap A with B and C with D. So yeah, let me rotate this by another 180. Go here. See over here. Oh, okay. Well, this makes it obvious that A and C need to swap, and B and D need to swap. Let's go with something that breaks this symmetry. Yeah, okay, so this is just like the starting position, except A and D are swapped. I think any of these is fine. Yeah, one thing I need to keep in mind is they might like mess up the starting state just testing things out, so I'm not even sure where they're going to be starting from. So I think this is pretty good. Right, so I'll put this on the right as the goal state. So let's assume that I know exactly how the puzzle works. I know what the goal state looks like, and I want to get from here to the goal state, the starting state to the goal state. Let's assume that I have to move each of them in a direction. I'll go as far as I can in that direction. Let's say we can go A down, B left, D up, and C right. It depends on what order they go in, because I did A, B, D, C there. But if I had gone A, B, C, D, then we would have wound up like this. And maybe they can go simultaneously too. Yeah, I mean, that would be the most intuitive thing. If you did A down, B left, C right, D up. The most intuitive next position would, I think, be this. So let's say instead we don't move C. So we want C to stay in place. So if I can move C down or left, then... Okay, so what I need to do in this case is move B somewhere other than left. So we'll have A go down, C go left. So we'll say B up, D right. So D right. Okay, so that's the first move. Yeah, so I'm going to have to decide if the players do something like have B go right and C go up on this turn, how that works out. Let's start over. I need to swap A and D. So going around clockwise, we start off with A, B, D, C. And I want to get to D, B, A, C. Yeah, swap D with B, D with A, B with A. So 3 swaps. I thought I could do it in 2. C, D, B. Okay, yeah, that would work too. Okay, cool. So I think the shortest path is going to be A with C, and then B with D. And then this is just a rotation from 3 to 4. Alright, so we need to start by swapping A and C. Let's have A slide down, and then the next turn we'll have it slide left. So we want A to slide down, and C to not move, because if it moved out of the way, then A would slide all the way down. So C has to go left or down, and it can't go down because A is going down, so C has to go left. Alright, so now we need A to go left and C to go up. So I need to decide what happens if you have A go left and C go up from this starting position. Yeah, so let's just assume that for whatever reason we can't have both C and A move on the same turn. I'll have to decide. I will have to figure that out, how I want that to work. But A slides out into the corridor. It only gets this far because the door will be open, and so it hits the edge of the door. C will not move, and I guess B and D don't need to move either. And this turn we want C to go up. Okay, yeah, so this one is very unclear. What happens if I have C go up and A go right on this same turn? I don't know, but let's say you can't do that. So you can have the directions happen in a deterministic order. It could be like left, right, up, down, or something like that. So let's go with this ordering for now. I may change that later. So left, then right, then up, then down. Yeah, so if you had A go right, since right happens before up, A would block off C. Yeah, so in this case, A can't go right if C is going to go up. So this is going to be a little tricky this last part. I didn't think this through. So with that, we're in the right permutation. They're all in the right corner. But now, how do we get from here to the goal state? This is going to be trickier than I thought. So we can have C and A move left and right like that, and so they'll come together, and that looks good. That means D and B need to go up and down. It means one of them needs to go down, so B will wind up there. That's great. Yeah, no, that works, because now A and C are stuck. They can't go up or down. So I'll have B go up, D go left, C go right, and A go down. And then I'll have D and B go right and left, A and C go up and down. Great, so that gets us there. So it's like 3 more moves to get from where they're all in the corners to where they're in the goal state. I think that's good. Yeah, so this rule system of deciding up, down, left, and right and assigning it to each of the 4, I think that works out really well. Great, got the basics down. Okay, so this is coming along okay. So what I did was I took the sarcophagus lid image from the map. I scaled it so it exactly fit in a 1x2 box and duplicated it a couple times. And then in the middle here, this 2x2 block is just a darkened sarcophagus lid. And I arranged them like this into the goal state. And I put this red zigzag on it to give you a clue for what the goal state is. And then I put a symbol on each of the lids. I cut it up and put it here in roll 20. And so each of these is a different piece that you can move around. So that looks pretty good. So this is the starting state right here. So I definitely need to cover over the map that's already there, because this is going to be confusing. And I think that's pretty good. Make it a little darker so that the tombs themselves stand out. So I am not going to give the players control of these objects. I'm going to move them myself based on how they arrange the jars. But hopefully they'll be able to see what they need to do with this and then direct me so that they can solve this. As for the jars, I couldn't find a image of a jar that I liked, so I drew one. It's not great, but it'll do. So I made versions of the jars without any symbol on them and versions with each of the 4 symbols added. And those go here in the false tomb room. And these I will give control of to the players. So it'll start off and there'll be 4 unlabeled jars in each of the 4 niches. And the players can move them around. So I'll have the players put these in whichever niche they want, and then once they do, I will move the tombs in the corresponding way. So there's 2 things that they have to learn. First of all, which jar corresponds to which tomb, and then once they figure that out, they'll get the versions with symbols. And they also have to figure out which niche corresponds to which direction. Now I have it written here, but I'm planning to have this hidden at first and then only reveal it once they figure it out. I thought about making this another puzzle that they have to do, maybe like a logic puzzle that says, oh, this symbol can't mean east or whatever. But if I did that, it would basically be a separate puzzle. So I think I'm just going to make this a task that they have to do. They'll still have to do some exploration, like looking around, but I'm imagining like somewhere in the walls they can find a map. And when they do, they can look at the compass rose there. And they can see the symbols that are on the compass rose. So next I have to decide some details, like what kind of clues can they get. I have some ideas about this part. Don't punish experimentation. Yeah, so this is something that I've learned from a previous puzzle. I showed that you can solve this puzzle in like 14 moves or something like that, and I think it's cool to try to challenge puzzle solvers to do it in the least moves possible. One way you can do that, for instance, is every time they make a move, they have a chance of taking damage, so then they're incentivized to do it in as few moves as possible. I don't want to completely write off that idea, but I don't generally like it anymore. And the reason is that it punishes experimentation. If you punish players for making a move that they don't know if it's good or not, what that encourages is that once they understand the rules, they go and work out all off on paper so that they don't make any move until they're sure it's right. And that's just not as fun. Maybe I will punish them for certain mistakes, but I want to make it so that just trying things out is not a bad idea. Provide symbols. Okay, yeah, so once they've finished the task of associating each jar with a tomb, And I'm still not sure how they're going to do that. One idea I'm having is that they can carry the jars into this room and place them on the tombs, and if all of them are placed in the right position, then something will happen so that you know which is which. And then once they do that, then I will swap out these jar images for these ones with symbols on them, as if the party had like drawn the symbols on themselves. The alternative for this is I could have had like each of the jars be a different color, for instance, and then once they made the association, they'll remember, oh, okay, so spades is the blue jar, and then they'll have to remember that association and putting them in. So by providing these versions with symbols, I'm making it a little less work for them, and I think that's good. It doesn't really add to the challenge in like a puzzle-solving way. Provide directions. Yeah, so this is another thing I could have done. So instead of having these arrows that I just show, I could have like drawn 4 symbols here, and then I can show the compass rose somewhere else that has those 4 same symbols on it. So there's the same issue. It's just more work for the players without actually making the puzzle any more interesting, I think. One thing that is potentially confusing here is that this map is not oriented with north up. North is actually to the right. So I thought it might be kind of funny to have this like covered up at first and let them sort of assume that north is up on this map. And they find a compass rose and they try that and it doesn't work, and they're like, hey, wait a minute, we don't actually know which direction is up. And then I like reveal this enormous north pointing to the right. I don't think that's like a good puzzle challenge, but it's sort of like a funny gotcha. I'll think about that. Okay, recognizable symbols. Yeah, okay, so you may have noticed that the 4 symbols that are in use here are the 4 suits. And there's a good reason for that. I thought about doing some random abstract symbols. I thought about taking these 4 symbols from the top here and using them. The reason I went with these is because they're going to be communicating about it back and forth a lot. Let's see, decided against larger niche arrangements. Okay, yeah, so like I said, the way that they're going to do this is to make a move, they just need to put 1 jar each in each of the 4 niches. I thought about making this a lot more complicated. I thought, okay, what if there was a 4x3 arrangement of niches and you had to put only certain combinations of occupying 4 spaces will actually work. And you have to work out like some additional set of rules there. That wouldn't be bad in some cases, but in this particular case, this arrangement is just very elegant. It's it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, nothing else I thought of like struck me as like good as what we already have here. Maybe if this puzzle turns out to be too easy, I'll revisit that, but this is pretty good. So that's about it for now. I will go ahead and keep working on these finishing touches. Okay, great. So I have finished designing the puzzle as I'm planning to run it for my players, and I've finished prep for the rest of the dungeon, so I just have some notes here that don't necessarily have anything to do with the puzzle. I've got Fargus's ex-partner here, the corpse of Fargus's partner, holding a jar in Area 2. I put one of the jars in Area 3, and the other 2 I started here in Area 4. I'm using the DM darkness layer, where you just like hide areas from players. I talked a little bit about using the dynamic lighting so that a player in Area 3 could only see Area 3 and a player in Area 4 could only see Area 4. I pretty much never use dynamic lighting. It's a fine tool, but I prefer doing it this way. And I thought about setting it up just for this one encounter, but I decided against it. So the way I decided that I'm going to run that is just as long as they have some player in Area 3 and the doors are open connecting Area 3 to Area 4, then they can see what's going on in Area 3 and communicate it over to whoever's controlling the jars. But other people running it might choose to use dynamic lighting, and I think that would work well too. So I wasn't really sure how to start this puzzle, and the way I wound up going with it was saying that basically just to start, you can see that there's a puzzle and you need to try to work out the mechanics. So you can try putting jars on sarcophagi, doing investigation checks, or trying to examine the jars of those sarcophagi, looking at the niches, looking around for symbols that you might see. And this is just sort of an open-ended like exploration task. The idea is that the specters that were hiding in the sarcophagi are waiting. They're watching and waiting, and once it becomes clear that you know enough to solve the puzzle, they're going to attack. Hopefully the players will drop what they're doing as far as the puzzle goes, finish the combat encounter, not feel like they have to solve them both at the same time. And once they finish the combat encounter, then they can actually solve the puzzle. I think that'd be a good way to split it up. So I've written this all up in a document. I'm calling version 1. So this explains how to set it up and what you need to do for each step. This is what I'm going to run for my players. Ideally, I'd have somebody playtest this beforehand, but everyone I will get to playtest is a player in this campaign, so there's not really anyone great for me to ask. My players running this will be like the first playtest for this puzzle, so I may wind up making some tweaks after I see how it actually plays out in practice. Yeah, I think this is pretty good. I'll go ahead and stop here, and I will resume the video in a few weeks once my players have tried this puzzle. Okay, I'm back. It's a few weeks later, and as you can see, my players have successfully completed this puzzle. So now I'll take a few minutes to go over my thoughts, having tried it out. Overall, I thought it was a pretty solid puzzle. Yeah, I'm happy with how it went. I made a few changes to the write-up, so this is version 2. This is the one I'll link in the video description. I didn't make any changes to the mechanics of the puzzle, it's just changes to the advice for running the puzzle. So I'll do a quick recap of the events. Overall, it took about 45 minutes to solve the puzzle, and that's not including the 30-minute combat encounter that happens halfway through. Alright, so the party arrived at Area 2, and they found the corpse of Fargus's partner, along with one of the Canopic jars. They did cast Speak with Dead to talk with the corpse of Deve Priorby, but they did this before they visited Area 3 or Area 4, so they didn't know anything about the puzzle. So they didn't ask any questions about the puzzle. They just asked him about traps in the dungeon and what had killed him. And I made it so he was trying to solve the puzzle when he was killed. So they didn't know about the puzzle, but they asked about the significance of the jar. So I just had him say that he thought the jar was part of unlocking the larger treasure in the tomb, but he hadn't figured it out when he was killed. Then they went in from Area 2 to Area 3, and they found another one of the jars and the 4 tombs, and they did enough investigation to tell that there was some hidden passageway here, but they couldn't access it. They spent a while trying to figure it out at this point. They couldn't because they only had 2 jars, and they hadn't been to Area 4 yet. I think that's totally reasonable and expected. Eventually, I just kind of said after 15 or 20 minutes, you can tell that there's something that you're missing here and you can't solve this yet. I wish I had a slightly better way to clue that, but it wasn't too bad. Then they went down to Area 4 and they found the other 2 jars and the false tomb, and they solved the puzzle from there pretty much as expected. So I remember I wasn't sure how I was going to have them figure out the labels of the jars corresponding to the labels on the tombs and the directions on each of the 4 niches. So they wound up doing it just by experimentation, putting the jars into the niches and seeing which way the tombs moved. And I think that worked really well. I think it's okay to have a backup, but I think that that's probably my preferred method for having them figure that part out. So yeah, it was interesting overhearing them talk back and forth about how they thought the jars worked. But yeah, they got it in a pretty reasonable amount of time. One of the players had an alternate idea that the first 2 jars would select one of the 4 tombs, and the second 2 jars would select one of the 4 directions. I think it's a pretty good hypothesis. I'm not sure exactly how it would work, but they were able to eliminate it pretty easily when they saw 2 tombs moving at once. And from there, it was pretty quick for them to get the intended answer. Okay, so what I liked about this puzzle, I thought the difficulty level was really good. Like I said, it took them about 45 minutes to solve the puzzle, which I think was great. I didn't get the impression that it got boring. I feel like they were pretty engaged throughout the whole thing. So I was pretty happy with the labels I added to the tombs and the jars. I think that worked out pretty well. For the first part of the puzzle, while they were still figuring it out, I just used the unlabeled tomb images with the labeled jar images. However, there was a period of time where they were discussing this, figuring out the mechanics of the puzzle, and in order to do that, they assigned letters to each of the unlabeled tombs in order to, just so they could talk to each other about it. And they wound up going with the exact same lettering I have here, A, B, C, D. So yeah, I think if you're doing this in person, it would be great to give the players a way to label them so that they can talk to each other about which is which without having to say, oh, the one with the red mark in the upper left corner. So I included 3 versions of the lids in the write-up. I have the unlabeled ones, the ones with the letter in case you want to swap that out, and the ones with a symbol once they figure out the association. I was considering having dynamic lighting or some other way to make it so that a player here in Area 4 would not be able to see how the tombs are arranged in Area 3 and vice versa. And I wound up not doing that, and I think that was the right decision. Just because the way it works out, the player in Area 4 here will kind of be excluded. Even if they're the ones controlling the jars, they won't see what's going on with the tombs, and so they're just going to be following the orders of the player in Area 3. So that way all the players can follow along. It's not just they're following orders from some other player and then, oh, suddenly the puzzle's solved. I did, however, require them to have characters in each of those rooms so that they could communicate back and forth. So they had Spiderbait in Area 4 here, Fargus in Area 2, and Jimjar and Eldeth in Area 3. And even though it didn't really impact the solving of the puzzle, it was great because then when the combat encounter happened and the specters rose out of the sarcophagi, all the doors slammed shut, so they were kind of cut off from each other, and one of the specters came through the wall to attack Fargus. So, like I said, I still like this puzzle. I think it's great. I would use it again. But let me go over a couple of issues I had with it. First of all, like I said, they tried to solve it before they had all the components of the puzzle, and maybe it would be good to have some indication that they didn't have all the pieces ready when they were just in Area 3. One of the first things they did when they saw that they needed to line up this red zigzag was to remove the lids off the sarcophagi and put them in place, and that is such an obvious thing I just didn't think of. So in the moment I said, oh no, they're stuck on, you can't remove them, and they accepted that, but I definitely should have thought of it ahead of time. The most confusing part of the puzzle when you're running the puzzle as the DM is managing these ties. Like in this case, if the diamond wants to go down, the heart wants to go right, in this arrangement, how do you resolve that? And I have rules for that in the write-up, but I got a little confused about it, and I have to imagine somebody who didn't write the puzzle would also get confused about it, and that's kind of a problem. If you're confused about it, there's a good chance, like if you make a mistake or something, there's a good chance the players are going to wind up confused about it. So I do stress that in the write-up, that you should really understand this step. I wish that there was a simpler way to resolve these ties without it being so confusing. Thought about an alternate mechanic where you're just moving one tomb at a time, and the problem comes in here at the end when you get them all in the right order, but then you need to line them up vertically with the stone in the center. What really works best is if you can move two tombs at once toward each other and they can meet in the middle, and neither of them wins the tie there. That works out pretty well, so it only takes 3 moves to go from all the corners to the solved state. I think it is possible to solve if you just move one at a time, but it's a lot more moves. Let me see. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that's not a very intuitive sequence. I think that if you had to do it like that, that could be a potential ordeal for the players. So as it is, I just put in the write-up. Make sure you understand it so the players don't get confused. This is probably just good general RPG puzzle advice, but you need to be careful about making mistakes. Usually when you're the game master, you're keeping track of so many things, like in combat or something like that. And if you make a mistake, it's not really a big deal. Players understand that and everything. But when you're controlling a puzzle and you're resolving the player's actions, that you really want to be careful not to make any mistakes, because that has pretty bad repercussions. Like if you're reading this sequence and it says clubs, spades, diamonds, hearts, but you misread it as spades, clubs, diamonds, hearts, and you move one of the tombs wrong, that could wind up taking an extra half hour in the game to figure out. Especially when I was doing this, these tombs didn't have any labels on them, so I was going back and forth between the label versions and the ones that were there without labels. Another thing along those lines is I recommend resolving the state immediately. So what I mean by that is once there's a jar in each of the 4 niches, you move the tomb objects immediately as a result of that. So what happened was one player would say, okay, I want to see what happens if we do clubs, spades, diamonds, hearts, and then the player who's controlling the jars would put them in place, but then that player or another player would keep talking. It's oh yeah, so my hypothesis that I want to test here is this and this. And that's great. I normally very rarely try to interrupt my players. I love it when they talk things out. But in this case, I did interrupt my players. I'd say, okay, all right, hang on. As soon as you put the jars in, here's what happens. Yeah, so the danger is if you go have a 5-minute discussion between putting the jars in place and moving the tombs, then it's possible you'll forget, and the players will ask you in 5 minutes, okay, so did anything happen when we put these jars in? And it'll be easy to forget whether you did anything. Once I realized that was important and we figured it out, we got into a rhythm. So they would line up the jars next to it, or put 3 of them in, and they would discuss what they wanted to see next. They wouldn't put the last jar in until they were ready to see it. Yeah, so like I said, overall, I like this puzzle. I think it worked out well. I think it went well in the session. Yeah, we stopped the session right when they solved the puzzle, so they have not encountered the Wraith yet. So next session, we'll see if they survive that. Alright, that was the design process for a puzzle for the Lost Tomb dungeon. This was an experimental video for me. I don't plan to record a video like this for every puzzle I design, but I would be interested in doing more RPG puzzle content. Not sure exactly what that'll look like yet. We'll see. Anyway, thanks for watching.